Wait, what stage are we in? Because again, I can't see.
We're in power plant.
Okay. One thing I want to say about this stage
But
aesthetic...
I used the Team Blast to kill the enemies, and I guess there was still a turtle energy ring lying around.
Yeah, one thing I like about this stage's aesthetic is just how many colors it manages to juggle without it looking too jumbled. My favorite parts are when you're indoors and you can see like these glass panes, and on the other side are trees. So it's not a completely barren type of city. You do get a feeling that people could actually live here, that it's, you know, a pleasant enough place. It's just really dangerous with all the falling bridges and the lava and fireballs and everything.
Exo, don't game over on us because we need to sit here for 3 more hours.
I just checked. I have 8 lives. We'll make it.
But to come back to the length thing, I think with Sonic, the problem that people are having is exactly that. I think people want the games to not be padded out and filled with stuff just to make it longer. I think people actively don't want that right now. And that's also why Sonic Unleashed got a lot of crap, and also Forces, I think. Even though Forces isn't long at all, but there's so much optional content in Forces that feels like complete padding to me.
Yeah, the mission stuff, which I've never seen anyone even talk about.
The mission stuff is just, yeah, it's completely
I don't know why they keep bothering with that. Because they started with that in Adventure, with optional missions. And that was fine because it was optional and stuff. But then, like, as you went on with these games, it seems like they kept trying to force more of that. Like, especially once you get to, like, 2005, 2006, and you get to, like, the storybook games, and, you know, it's like you'll play Sonic Unleashed on the Wii, and it's just like, it'll interrupt the flow of the game to make you collect 100 rings in a stage you just played. It's just like, were people really asking for missions in Sonic?
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing if it's an optional thing you do for emblems to unlock stuff. It's another thing when, like, you're playing the storybook games and it's like, go through the level without breaking any jars. And it's just like, who cares? Who wants to play that in a Sonic game?
Yeah, it's sort of... I always remember, for some reason, like a letter that was written into Nintendo Power around the time Yoshi's Story came out, where... and I hope I'm remembering this right, but they basically said that, like, in Yoshi's Story, one of the things that you could do to get a really high score was to go through a level only getting melons. But the letter writer was like, the problem is that's not a fun way to play the game. And I feel like a lot of the missions, a lot of that side content in that they've tried to use to make the Sonic games longer sort of falls into that same purview. Like, where's the fun in just running through like, I always remember Sonic Adventure 2's Lost Cow levels. Like, where's the fun in slowly scouring every nook and cranny looking for this thing that I have to whistle at?
Yeah, it's just busy work.
Pretty much.
It's just an attempt to keep your attention, but in a way that's more likely to lose people's attention. You know, so it's not just an issue of time and padding, but again, that general arcadey mindset of Sonic and Sega games in general, where you are kind of expected to play it multiple times and get better each time until you're able to look really stylish doing it. Like, heck, Jet Set Radio. Yeah, that's a great example of that. But again, some people think that isn't a valid way to make games. But here's a good example of like the contrast. Let's take 2 Mario games, Mario 64 and Mario 3D World. I can enjoy 3D World with friends. It's good, clean fun, it's a nice environment for that, but playing it by myself, it's pretty boring, because most of his moves are nerfed, in a way that is guaranteed to work a certain way just about every time, but only that way. Whereas in Mario 64, the controls, you know, they're a little more goofy, a little more slippery, and now and then they might fail me somehow, but I enjoy the flexibility. I feel like there is the potential for me to do more by experimenting than there is in a much cleaner, more polished game than 3D World. And so I tend
feel
to...
that...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just tend to enjoy those more loosey-goosey kind of games than the perfectly polished ones that are always going to play out a certain way. I like there being a slight bit of unpredictability because I feel like it's more of me doing it, you know?
but it doesn't Odyssey. I still haven't played it. I know, but isn't Odyssey kind of the perfect balance where there's a lot of free movement and stuff you can do, but the controls don't fail on you, from what I understand.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Like
that game also has the same problem of having too much content.
Yeah, but I mean in terms of controls. But I mean in terms of controls,
yeah, in
right?
terms of controls, yes, but it does have the problem of, you know, let's put 1 billion filler moons in this video game that require almost no effort to get, because Japanese people are going to play this game on the bus and they want to be able to get a moon in 5 seconds while they're on the bus.
Yeah. Well,
see, I know.
Oh, sorry.
As time's gone on, I do hear that complaint more and more about Odyssey. Is that sort of people looking back on it and being like, okay, but it was great. Like, it was definitely like wonderful to play it and get to the end and just do that. But you know, like, those filler moons have kept me coming back all this time. I'm not saying I play it often, and I'm not saying I play it for long when I do, but you know, sometimes I'll get an inkling to play a little Odyssey, and I can always get in there and get something accomplished. Like, I feel
like Odyssey was never designed around 100% completion in the first place.
But I do definitely agree with what you were with
you know, it all goes to show just priorities, what people care about. Because it's like,
just
you know,
going back to the controls again, I do appreciate when games give you a little flexibility to play around with it, even if you're going to mess up like an idiot and be humiliated. The problem is a lot of people will do that and then they'll blame it on the game, like, well, it shouldn't even have been possible for me to fail that way. The game just should have been airtight. It's like, well, okay, but it's just more fun to me to have that extra degree of control. It's why I like games like Sunshine for all the problems it has. And yes, it's something I appreciate about Odyssey.
Yeah, what you're saying about priorities is definitely very true, EXO, because I think that is part of it, because I don't care if I never 100% Odyssey. I wouldn't set out to do that in the first place. If I get there, fine. If not, that's fine too. But I can definitely see it really, if you are a completionist and you are somebody who wants to like 100% a game and to call it finished, like, if I had to just get in there and play all of those, if I felt like I had to get in there and play all those filler moons and try to beat it all at once and get it done and get it out of the way, then yeah, I can see that really wearing on me.
Yes.
So I wanted to say, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, go ahead, RZ.
I was gonna respond to Nick saying, Sonic, the classic Sonic games are also ones where, you know, you have a little more room to experiment and think outside the box with the controls. But I feel like the classic Sonic games never suffered from controls that fail you. For what they are, I feel like the controls in classic Sonic are perfectly polished and do exactly what they should do.
Well, part of the difficulty there is just that so much more can go wrong in a 3D environment, you know? It's much harder to account for like what a player might do, or where a player might jump, or where the player might like try to put the character in 3D.
Yeah, but then you look at Sonic Adventure 1 and I feel like the game offers that flexibility with the controls while still feeling pretty precise. It's more like the camera stuff that's bad in Sonic Adventure, and not so much the controls themselves, I think.
And by the time
Whereas in Sonic Heroes, with Sonic Heroes, I feel like, and you don't have all that much room to experiment and do crazy stuff with it, and it's still kind of janky.
Yeah, the problem with like, when we get to the later Sonic games, like Unleashed and so on, where the speed is, where Sonic controls like a car. You know, he drifts like a car. Boosting is essentially pushing the gas pedal. He doesn't feel as much like an organic living thing that's just doing all these things. And yeah, the classic Sonic games are a perfect example of how this kind of thing can really pay off. Where it's like, okay, if someone doesn't really understand the controls, they're not going to get very far with it. But the potential to reach like amazing heights, the badnik bounce, you know, rolling, all these crazy tricks, it opens up this, like it raises the ceiling of what you can do in a platformer. Whereas a platformer with like super airtight controls that always plays out a certain way, you're never gonna reach that level, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I guess one. By the way, we're at Bingo Highway, Nick.
Ooh.
But one thing I wanted to mention.
Shit level, by the way.
Sure. But well, no, I didn't mean that facetiously.
Okay.
But because
Exo's lost his train of thought.
No, I'm getting there. The train's pulling into the station.
No, that's the next level.
Oh, damn. Well played, sir.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's just like Josh, obviously you and I, we have a fairly large age difference. Well, relatively speaking. And that means that when we played certain games, particularly in Sonic series, we know you have a different background on it. Like at the time that you were growing up, classic Sonic just was Sonic.
Exactly.
And you know, you were young enough that you didn't really have like preconceived notions about what a game should play like, or relatively speaking, you know. And you know, and it sounds like at least when the early 3D games, the first couple of 3D games came out, like, you know, those you had fun with them and stuff. And it's just kind of like my experience was very different, obviously. Like when I was growing up, these were the Sonic games I thought of. Like I remember renting the Mega Collection from the video store once and playing them and just like not being able to get more than a couple zones in any of the games, and the controls felt wrong to me. And I just didn't get it at the time.
But like,
and it was,
despite our age difference, I did have similar experiences, because I remember like playing NES games back then, like when I was a kid, and being like, man, this is a lot different and a lot harder, because, you know, like the standards of how to even do 2D games weren't standardized and hadn't been figured out nearly as much as they had by the time that, you know, I became a gamer in the 16-bit age.
Well, I let me put it this way, like, obviously, when I reviewed the classics, I tried to kind of bring that perspective in, because, like, you know, there's legitimately good design elements in them, don't get me wrong, but I do think that there is an element of people are used to them because they grew up with them, so they, you know, some of the flaws don't resonate with them as well, particularly with Sonic 2. Which is something I still get crap for. Not entirely undeservedly, but, you know, there were elements. When I first played that game, when I got to the Death Egg Robot, I legitimately had no idea how I was supposed to play it because of the lack of rings and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And there was the limited continues and stuff, you know. And it's just like... So, like, when I played those games for the first time, that put me out of it. And it's kind of like how when people played, I guess, SA2 for the first time and then play, like, treasure hunting, they don't understand that you're supposed to use hints or how you're supposed to use that with the radar or how you're supposed to play them, essentially. And part of the problem there is that the game doesn't really tutorialize it very well. But it's just, I could play those no problem and consistently beat every one of those stages in about 5 minutes or less. But when you don't know how you're supposed to play them, then it is frustrating, and I do think that a certain element of that is the game's fault. A certain element of that is, you know, the player just needs to kind of understand what they're supposed to do. You know, so it's kind of like the game doesn't teach you, and the people aren't willing to learn. If that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, like you were talking. Somebody here was talking a little earlier about like not knowing how to press down to roll, and like I remember distinctly, for some reason, I'd been playing Sonic games for months at this point, because I had to have been, because I had Sonic 3 by this point, and figuring out, oh, like I can press down and I'll roll into a ball without doing a spin dash in Marble Garden Zone.
Yeah, I remember figuring that out in Sonic 1 and realizing that's how you're supposed to kill the Caterkillers in Marble Zone.
Yeah, you know, that's a good point that I never thought of before, is that, like, Sonic 1 had the Caterkillers and had an enemy that was sort of designed to make sure you knew how to do that. Like, I honestly...
But even then, it took me like 10 playthroughs to realize that.
Like, before that point, I would sometimes, like, accidentally hit down. And then, like, oh, I'm rolling, I wonder why. But, you know, I associated that, like, rolling on the ground with spin dashing. And I thought that was the only way that you were supposed to be able to do that.
You know,
so this is why I think it's a good thing that a lot of modern games I don't want them to over-tutorialize anything, but if you look at like Dark Souls, at least they give you an overview of all the stuff you can do and what the buttons for it are. So that there's no mechanic that's like there that you don't know how to use. If Sonic 1 had a button prompt saying press down to roll, then the issue would have been fixed.
Well, yeah,
it doesn't
but like
have to
no
be
games,
intrusive.
no games back
doesn't
then
have
never
to-
had
expected you
anything
to
like
read
that.
the manual.
Right.
Just one thing I want to say
Which
before
is
we
something
go.
that, which is something that I'm really sad is going away, because I like manuals for the artwork, if nothing else.
Yeah. Before we get too far, execution aside, I think this stage is pretty awesome. I just love the idea of it, the spectacle of it. It's one of the most unique takes on the casino-level trope that we've seen in a Sonic game, and I don't think anything has come quite as close to like how outrageous this one is. I love how the entire thing is this descent down a series of ramps. It's like, we get a lot of Sonic levels where you're going up, but this is one of those ones kind of like City Escape, where you're always going down, just careening wildly. And I love the focus on blue, I love the bingo element itself, but I admit, it's stupid hard, and really easy to lose all your team members. Really, I think the best way to do it would be if only one of you was going down the ramp, and if that one fell off, you would switch to one of the other two at the beginning of the descent. But, oh well. Anyway, I just love how crazy this stage is, and even just the name, Bingo Highway, that is badass. I would love it if they made another casino-type level that tried to be a massive spectacle like this. Like the previous one, Casino Park, was very ho-hum. You know, it's your pretty typical casino Sonic stage, all bright and cheery. And this one's just like, hey, let's just go, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like now we're at the casino and it's after midnight. But yeah,
there is a character in Sonic Adventure who was addicted to gambling, and her child had to keep trying to keep his mother from going to the casino to gamble all their money away.
Oh wow, that's depressing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that difference in perspective is like exactly like what I've always loved about watching your work, is just that like you notice things and you see things as flaws and you see things as positives that like might have never occurred to me, or that like I probably wouldn't have noticed. You have such a like different perspective on a lot of things that from what I do, and you're really, really good at like articulating like why you see things that way. And like I always walk away feeling like I understand your perspective and I understand a different perspective better.
Wait, who are you talking to?
Exo.
Thank you, Josh.
Right.
Like, you're the only person who's ever been able to explain to me, like, why somebody might enjoy Mario Sunshine. I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it.
But what Exo, what you have with the classic Sonic games, I think that's why it's so important that at least the game lays out its basic rules and mechanics. There's a lot of backlash when games have any sort of button prompt whatsoever. But sometimes you don't go to a new job where you have no idea what you're supposed to do, and your manager is just like, oh yeah, do this, and then doesn't tell you how the system that they have works.
That was, I had a stocking job at a grocery store once that was like that.
Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of what games without telling you whatsoever how to play the game is like. If you don't know the rules, then it's difficult to play.
I love button prompts when they're done in a clever way, when they're part of the environment. Like, say you're in a natural setting.
Donkey Kong Country.
They'd be cave wall markings, or, you know, just etched into the ground or the wall. And say you're in a city, well, you'd have all these like TV screens or billboards that would have the controls written on them. I love it when games do that.
Well, the thing is, back then...
You know, this is an aside, but one thing I really didn't like in Sonic Mania was how I can't remember which zone it was. It was the TV zone, I think, the second one. Studiopolis, yeah, and how in the background you could see 480i televisions, and there was interlace flicker.
You didn't like that?
That's something that only is someone like me would appreciate.
Exo, nobody cares. Okay, what were we talking about? What were you talking about? Nobody cares.
Anyway,
well, so much for RZ might care.
Yeah. I've gone over 480i. Since the OSSC has entered my domain,
no.
I don't care anymore.
This is the only time I will ever say anything positive about 480i, about any video game.
Okay.
And it's like fake 480i and TVs in the background.